Welcome. Thank you so much for attending this professional development webinar, Addressing the Housing Crisis with Hope and Courage, presented to you by the Financial Education Public-Private Partnership. Again, thank you so much to everybody who is here today. I appreciate everyone being here. And just briefly, we're going to go through our norms and clock hours. All right, and perfect timing. Please sign in with your name and school or district or community or organization in the chat again. And Linda will be explaining to you how you will be getting your clock hours for this webinar. Linda.
Thank you, Amy, and I appreciate everybody signing in with their information. It just makes things much easier when we're trying to match up the names in PD Enroller to the chat. And so everyone that was registered in Survey Gizmo, we dumped everybody into PD Enroller that said that they were going to be claiming clock hours, and tomorrow I will go in and take attendance in the morning and mark off who attended to get that hour and a half, that 1.5 clock hours. And there will be also available, when we do that, we're also going to drop a copy of the PowerPoint as a PDF into the attendee page of PD Enroller as well.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, Linda. These presentation slides and additional resources will be made available to you for use in your schools, professional developments, PLCs, or for any other use that you see fit. We will make sure you get these resources. If you're able to safely do so, we do appreciate if you can turn your camera on and participate in the chat and in activities, again, when you're safely able to do so. Just for us as presenters, it's lovely to see faces as we're talking. And again, the chat is open for questions as we move through some of this content. Please do note that AI chatbots are not permitted in our webinars, and so they will be removed. Thanks. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and start, as always, with a land acknowledgement. And this map comes from native-land.ca, which is an organization that honors the sovereignty of all Indigenous nations, their lands, and their waters. They recognize that these boundaries and territories are representations of the sacred. And so we share this map because we, with native-land.ca, respect the rights of Indigenous data sovereignty and are committed to an ongoing process of collaboration, growth, and learning as we work to update and replace information that is a continuation of trauma caused by theft, injustice, misinformation, and ignorance. And this map is a living document informed by the contributions of Indigenous communities, Indigenous knowledge holders, and their stories, and is an honoring of Indigenous resilience, past, present, and future. I am honored to be joining you from the traditional lands of the Spokane people today. So hello from Eastern Washington, where it is beautiful. So again, thank you for spending the sunny afternoon here with us. Briefly, I would love to introduce us, the Financial Education Public-Private Partnership. I do see quite a few repeat names, but I also see some new attendees. So hello, we are FEP. We were established in 2004 by your Washington State Legislature, and our overarching goal is to increase access to high-quality, diverse financial education in our K-12 school system. And we do this by reviewing financial education instructional materials, and you'll see some of the resources and research that we do today. We list those materials on our website, www.fep.org, and we provide professional development and training opportunities like this one at no cost. In addition, we do facilitate a grant that is available for increasing financial education within districts. And so if that's something you're interested in, I recommend checking out our website to learn more information. And here at FEP, we believe in a holistic approach to financial education. We very much recognize what is already placed on our K-12 educators, and also that financial education is a wide-ranging, robust topic that encompasses a lot of meaningful cross-curricular opportunities. And we at FEP really aim to leverage those opportunities to fit in financial education while still recognizing the time constraints that are on the educator. And so I hope you see that our materials are very teacher-centered, and that we really look at K-12 financial education from this high-level holistic point of view. We see how it overlaps with so many different, not only subject areas, but social emotional skills that we learn in childhood and bring into adulthood. And we also really see how this, all the way from kindergarten to 12th grade, is true college and career post-secondary readiness for our students to confront the financial decisions that we make every single day, outside of, again, that high school experience. And so today we are going to talk about our housing and unhomed crises that we are experiencing here in Washington. We're going to spend the first part, that's going to be me, Amy. I'm going to go through some data with you. We have to go through some of this emotional data to get through to that empowerment on the other side. Then I will be sharing a few ways to look at that data through a lens of hope and not through a lens of fear or discouragement. And then Milady will take over for the second half of our PD, and she will be talking about starting these courageous conversations in our classroom, as well as sharing a lesson on receiving government assistance, which is an act of courage when you have no other financial choices. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Okay. First thing, we do have a participant sort of question for you guys, and I am going to move on from this. Let's see, not sure here. All right, but if you're able to, in the chat, please, what generation do you identify with? We do have a chart there on the right-hand side. When and where did you pay for housing? When did you first pay for housing? And how much did you pay, if you do recall? So my name is Amy. Hi, I'm Amy. I'm a millennial. My first apartment, it was an apartment, would be my first housing in Beaverton, outside of Portland, Oregon. I attended my undergrad in Portland, Oregon. Oh, I had to reach back. I want to say I paid around $350 for a fairly large studio in Beaverton at the time. And this would have been 2006-ish. So I'm 41. So, oh, fantastic. We're starting to get answers in the chat. I really do encourage you guys to take a look at what some folks paid. In the meantime, I'm going to introduce myself, and then Milady will have a chance as well, and she'll share some of her housing information when she does that. So please do continue to work through those answers in the chat. So again, hi, I'm Amy. I'm honored to serve as the K-8 program supervisor here at the Financial Education Public-Private Partnership. I'm a Pacific Northwest girl, born and raised in Spokane, Washington. I did spend my teaching career in Glendale, Arizona. So I taught 5th grade, 7th grade, math, social studies, social emotional learning, and I did about 10 years of peer-to-peer instructional coaching there as well. So within this professional development, I'm going to try to make it as interesting and engaging for you as I can, as always. I consider myself a financial wellness work in progress. I am a first-time homeowner. I purchased my first home in 2023 after a long time of not knowing if that was going to be something I could accomplish. However, this dream did not come to fruition in the way I imagined it. I actually purchased my first home with my parents. I'm doing some multi-generational living, as well as a little bit of caretaking as they work through some health issues. So that's a little about me, and I'm going to turn it over to Milady to introduce herself now.
Thank you so much, Amy. I appreciate that. So happy to be here. I'm Milady Garcia, and I am the Special Populations Program Supervisor for FEP, otherwise known as the Financial Education Public-Private Partnership. I was born and raised in the Dominican Republic, but I lived most of my life in New York City. So have I got a story for you about very high rentals in that city. The very first time that I rented, I was actually having the same situation as Amy, multi-generational, but I took over the bills. So I inherited that rent and it was $13.50 a month. So it was a little higher. When I moved to Washington, that was my first time renting on my own, and it was $1,800. But it was a much nicer area, I can say that. My academic background is in early childhood special ed and early childhood general ed. I have also an academic background in Spanish literature with an area of focus in Latin American studies, and I am very, very happy to share with you. I also am a first-time homeowner, and I am signing the title for my home on Monday of next week. So this is fresh off the press for you all. And this content is very near and dear to my heart, as I know this is something that is increasing in the crisis, the homeless crisis, the housing crisis is increasing for all our communities and our students. So very happy to be here and hope that you learn a lot with us when we put these together. Amy and I, we do a lot of research and learning, and hope that you enjoy this webinar. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sandra.
Amazing. Okay, thank you so much to everyone participating in the chat. I love to see some of these answers, and thank you so much for sharing. One thing that I did notice that I experienced, I noticed in a couple answers, was utilities all included in your rent. If you scroll through, you'll see a couple of those. I did have that experience as well with one of my apartments in Portland proper. Everything, including internet, was free. I remember that being like mind-blowing at the time. That we would, I don't know if you can even see that now. So, all right, we have another question here for you. So if you are comfortable, please share in the chat. It does say here, how are you seeing the housing and homelessness crises reflected in your schools or communities? If you are more comfortable, you can simply share what brought you to this webinar. What about this topic interested you? And again, we are going to sort of move on from that slide as we kind of explain a little bit about our approach over our next sort of 90 minutes together as we confront what can be a very heavy and emotional topic. So again, if you are able to, we would love to know in the chat, what are you seeing either in your schools, in your rooms, or in your communities as we move through this next part. So we recognize that this topic it's heavy. I think that's just a really great way to describe it. Again, I'm very happy to be here, but I very much wish we did not have to be here to talk about these crises that are affecting our state. And so over the next 90 minutes, we want to bring an approach that balances this reality that we're in with the positivity and belief in our future, in a bright future, that we are empowered through this knowledge on the other side of the discomfort. We're also going to offer a slightly different perspective. These are unprecedented times. So we're going to recommend some unprecedented education. It might be unprecedented to you. It feels unprecedented to me because I know I never got it. So that's our intention here, is to look at these issues and think we need to come at this from a different point of view. What's happened to this point isn't working. So what can we do to try to impact some of these future choices for our students? So for the hope, we're going to talk about, it is wavy out there. The economic ocean is wavy right now. We don't hope the waves don't hit us. We learn to navigate them. That's how we spread hope through our students. And for Milady's side, she's going to talk about courage being the ability to have conversations, start conversations, and also ask for help. Okay, so we're going to go ahead now, and I just want to check in really quick with the chat again. Thank you so much to everybody who took the time to answer. We're seeing residents and students experiencing homelessness, more awareness, it looks like, of the unhomed students that we're experiencing, that they are experiencing, expensive to rent in the small town, multi-generational living, students living in alternative places like campers, doubling up. We're going to talk about doubling up, multi-shared living. Fantastic. Oh, and declining enrollment. Okay. And I think that is absolutely an impact of this that we are going to be seeing across districts. We know that declining enrollment is going to impact our funding as well. So again, thank you so much. If we're not able to read every answer now, we will be able to go back later and take a look, because we take this feedback, even just this formative feedback, seriously as we continue to plan our professional development. So the lack of affordable housing options is an urgent crisis in communities throughout Washington. I do not think I am, that's not earth-shattering news to anybody here. This is coming from our Washington Department of Commerce's Housing Advisory Plan. Okay, they evaluated housing availability and made recommendations for our state for the next 5 years. So we're going to start by just looking at Washington. In broad strokes, our crises can be summed up in a couple points. Home prices have risen faster than income. This is a massive issue. Still, in our state, people of color are less likely to become homeowners statistically. Affordable rental homes, the number does not meet the demand, and they are geographically clustered in certain areas of the state. And unstable housing has increased our homeless population. This is our broad strokes issues that we are dealing with. But again, if none of this happened in a vacuum, nobody snapped their fingers, there was no, horrifying Voldemort wand that was waved and did this. This happened for a reason. And so we're going to kind of go back to the beginning and look at how it happened, so we can be informed to bring this discussion to our students, but also just for ourselves, because like I said, these are volatile times. So we got to go back to 2008. I had just graduated college. This is my first Great Recession as a millennial. So post 9/11, if we go back even farther, post 9/11, we had really, really low interest rates. And it was really increasing home ownership for many years between 2001 and 2008. And along that time, banks are seeing, wow, everyone wants to get into a home. So they start taking on risk by letting buyers who normally would not qualify for homes into mortgages or home loans, we know, right? So this is when we started seeing different types of mortgages than your normal 30-year fixed rate mortgage, right? We started seeing subprime mortgages, and subprime, like their credit rating was subprime. It was not prime. So they were given a home loan, right, with this caveat of the higher interest rates for their less than ideal credit, right? We also had the adjustable rate mortgages, ARMs. You could also see them called floating mortgages. And these are home loans with a variable interest rate. Again, normally mortgages are fixed for 30 years. This was variable. So both of these loans depend on interest rates to stay low, right? And for the housing market to continue to increase. But that didn't happen because economically it wasn't sustainable, lots of factors. But basically interest rates start going up. Okay, that's a disaster to anybody with an adjustable interest rate. As far as your interest rate goes up, your monthly payment goes up. When it shoots up, like it did around 2008, now it's not just, oh, I got to scramble to cover things to make my mortgage payment. Now my mortgage payment has doubled or tripled, and there is absolutely no way it's not sustainable for me to keep this house and continue to make this payment. And when that happens, people lose their houses, right? So they have two choices. People who see the writing on the wall can start to sell, right? So borrowers are selling to get out from under their debt. At the same time, though, lots of people are just losing their homes. The banks are taking them back because they cannot make the payment. So this is flooding the market with homes, either from people selling or from people who have just lost their homes. Suddenly, there's tons of empty homes all over the country with nobody with the money to live in them, right? In addition, and I'm not going to get too deep into this, but financial institutions were also selling securities that were backed by these mortgages, right? So financial institutions were making more money off of this. So when the bubble burst and all the home values started going down, that also led to a credit crisis, right? Where we saw banks defaulting. So when no one is making their payments, banks are not getting cashed in, right? So there was lots of ripple effects from this home bubble, mortgage bubble that burst in 2008. But one of the biggest ones is that people who built homes went out of business because there were so many empty ones. No one is building a brand new home right now. And that's really important because that is going to flatline the American supply of homes. Okay, and not just Washington, we're talking the United States. When homeowners go out of business, we had been pretty steadily building homes at a rate that matched our population growth in the United States. And then in 2008, people just stopped building. But the population is not also going down. So we're doing what is called underbuilding, where we're growing as a country, but we're not growing the places we're going to put people. In addition, we've got construction being limited in some places that is growing really quickly by policy issues or regulatory issues. And that's going to be like zoning or permits or things like that. Also, there have been a couple trade wars. There have been a lot of international trade volatility. So high construction costs, plus of course, inflation after the pandemic, can't forget that. So high construction costs in general, right? Plus home values, the values of homes are still going up. We've got public health crises. We've got natural health disasters displacing people. We've got rising numbers of people immigrating to the United States. And then we had the pandemic and a bunch of homelessness prevention programs put in place. And then those prevention programs ended over the last couple of years. In addition, the other pandemic effect that we're seeing is the lock-in effect. And I think a lot of us probably know people who did own during the pandemic. Maybe you were one of these people. If you're comfortable sharing, we'd love to know. And rates were way, way down. So they refinanced. And now they have a 3% interest rate. It's historic lows. Those people are locked in, meaning it's not a cost-effective decision for them to move ever. Because now you've built a new budget around this very low monthly payment plan or monthly mortgage payment. And to shift that, right, because mortgages are no longer that low, locks you into the home that you're in and prevents you from moving, right? So that's keeping the supply, again, low, low, low. And in the meantime, everybody in kind of my generation is kind of reaching now our homeownership window where we've been in our careers for a while and we're starting to make more income and we're ready to be in that responsible quote unquote adulthood moment of owning. Rent also started increasing sharply. Again, a lot of this is when those COVID era protections happened, but we know rent had been increasing before that. Again, we talked about immigration, increasing immigration to the United States. Natural disasters are causing a lot of people to relocate. We're kind of doing like a second American migration. And I'd already talked about the rest of that. Okay, so these fundamental issues of supply and demand are just basic economics. But it's one of those great things that if you can blend this into your classroom and expose your students or your community members to your audience to this concept, it can be kind of like that little key that can unlock that understanding of like, man, you didn't do anything. This isn't 100%, like this isn't your fault. There is not enough supply to meet demand. And just knowing that can be a difference maker for, the emotional and mental, health of people. On top of that, you all live here, Washington is growing. We've felt it. Boy, did I feel it after having been gone and living in a large city like Phoenix and then moving back. And I'm over here in Spokane, like I mentioned, and I come home and a lot of people are complaining about the traffic. And I'm like, is it that bad? Because I've been in this big city, and to me, it doesn't feel so bad. But Milady and I have both talked about this, her having moved from New York and me leaving and then coming back to Washington. You have to do some adjusting and remember your context to see how much this state has grown and what issues it's causing us. So I have a couple graphs here to show you, just two. I love visuals. I was a math teacher, I love the visuals. So first, we're looking at a population growth here from 2010, and then we have our projected growth through 2050. And I know it might be kind of small, but the colors are really what's important here. The bottom green line is going to be the United States. That's the projected growth of the United States. You see that middle yellow is Washington. So we are growing above average, above the average state in Washington. Purple is just Puget Sound region. Anybody here in the Puget Sound region? I mean, I feel like you are probably seeing this more than anybody, because when you look at that, it's over 200, % from the average in the state. So that's crazy. So no, we're not imagining it. We really are growing, right? This isn't just messaging or whatever. It is absolutely true. Second one. When I was in Arizona, there was a real anger directed at people right when I was leaving from California. There was a lot of bumper stickers, "Don't California our Arizona," right? And I don't know, because I wasn't here at the time, if you were experiencing that same thing about 5 years ago. But when we look at the map, we can see the negative migration of California, and you can see the blue on the West Coast. And you can absolutely draw an inference that for multiple reasons, people are leaving California, whether it be wildfires, taxes. I mean, there's a bunch of reasons, home prices, but they have to go somewhere. And they really diaspored into, you can see that Phoenix area. I understand it a little better now. Southern Nevada, you see Boise, Western Montana, Northern Idaho. But then you see quite a few people leaving the Seattle area too, right? Like people maybe being priced out or maybe being tired of everyone else coming in, right? But we are absolutely one of these states that are being impacted by both positive and negative migration. You're probably seeing that if you're in your classrooms too. Students might not be staying the whole year. Clearly we're not quite at like the Florida kind of like level, but again, this is not in our imaginations. This is real, and this is data. So the thing about it is that Washington is still kind of a great place to live. So if we look at the data from our Office of Financial Management, and I guess I shouldn't be surprised, there's a reason why everyone wants to move here, right? Historically, we've had the third best economy of the states in the US. And our average income in 2022 was over $83,500 a year. That was our average wages. We were fifth amongst all the states and District in Columbia. And even now, if you look at this graph, it shows you the average wages in the United States and average wages in Washington. We pay better as a state than most places in the US, right? And our median income now, and we use median to kind of avoid those big outliers, median income of $101,000. How can we have a housing issue in our state when our median income is $101,000? Because we don't have the supply. It is not a question of being able to, well, it is a question of being able to afford it, because there is not enough to go around. So we have a livable wage. That sounds great. An average average income of over $100,000. But now we have to look at our home pricing, housing affordability. Okay, so here's our chart of housing affordability over 3 decades almost. And we're at record, unprecedented times, right? 641,700. That was the end of Q4 last year. That was the median house price. So between the last 10 years that we have data, 2013 and 23, we're seeing 141.5% increase in prices. And like Milady said when we were doing our rehearsal, that math is not mathing, right? Great, we make a good wage here. Houses are still too expensive. So for context, because we can say stuff like that, but I feel like my students are picking it up half the time, right? So I'm going to give it a hard number. In 2013, I could have bought a house for $150,000. But if I wasn't ready then, and I'm ready now, well, I was ready to, 23, 10 years later, and I wanted that exact same house, they would be asking $212,250 for it. It's just where there's nothing different about the house. It's just the values have gone up. The perfect storm is completed by mortgage rates because we're also experiencing a historic high in 30-year mortgage rates. This is just over the last 5 years in the graph we're looking at here. So we're seeing just like, wow, 3 or maybe a little bit under, all the way up to 8 and then back down. Now, for context, there have been points in history where, what was it, like 18% mortgages were at 17 or 18%. Okay, that was in the 70s and 80s. I swear, look it up. But so things have been worse. Okay, but that doesn't really help us a ton right now if you're really in your prime home buying years, So we are going to talk about that comparison a little bit later. So in summary, low supply, high demand, high cost of construction is making it trickier to build more. Local policies and regulations are making it trickier to build more, and financing is making it hard for even people who make good money to affordably get into a house. Again, a perfect storm. So what is a person to do, right? In Washington, they are researching. One thing we're going to do is research, okay? So the University of Washington has a Center for Real Estate Research. I think that's great. And they have these really cool dashboards. And I'm going to drop the links in. I'm just not going to do it right now because I'm on a roll with the technology and I don't want to mess myself up. So this dashboard, you can see here on this little, and I'm going to make it bigger, but you can look at it statewide, or you can look at it by county, or you could look at it by city, and you can look at it by time. Okay, so we're going to look at, they use a home affordability index. I'm a math person again, so I love this. They basically use median income and median home price to scale affordability. To me, it looks like a percentage, which I love, okay? So if our median income is just over 100,000, our median home price is around 640,000, then the average person making that income is about 65% affordable. I would say it more like, the way it made sense in my head was, this person has a 65% chance of making that mortgage payment on time every month, if you look at what they make and what they're probably paying. Okay, so when we're looking at using just this scale, home affordability, it's a percentage. So closer to 100 would be better, more affordable, right? When we look at the first, let's make it bigger. Okay, so if we are looking at median buyers and first-time buyers, just for the record, I have this information. A first-time buyer would have 85% of the median income. So they're assuming somebody buying for the first time is not making that full 100,000. That person has about a 45, 46% chance of making the payment on time, or making the payment every month. But now let's go down and look at renters, because the renting situation in Washington has actually improved, right? Renting, if you're making this amount, is very affordable, even for a low income renter. And that person would be making about 70% of that average, right? But for the average person making average income, renting is vastly more affordable right now in Washington than buying, okay? So that's going to create a lot of competition for our students as they go into their, independence and they start finding their own housing. So that's something to consider too. We really want to be benefiting the social and emotional skills our students are going to need to cohabitate successfully. And that is one thing we'll be talking about in our webinar next week. I had to look at Spokane. I really wanted to look at just some data over time, because that's one of these things that this home affordability index can kind of let you do. So I looked at when I bought versus the most recent data that they had, right? And so I was a first-time buyer in Spokane with that 58% affordability. But you know what? I was still able to make that work through, savings and goals and things like that. So yes, this is great data for information, but is it like the be all end all? No, right? But we're just trying to give tools so that we're looking in the right places, the right areas for the right information to help our students be successful. Also, just looking at trends over the last 2 years in Washington, I was just curious. So the median house price increased by 9%, and the median income increased by 11%. So yay, median income went up. Again, not enough to make a dent in that affordability meter. So renting is, like we said, it's more affordable in this state. And if we look at the income of people who rent, I kind of expect the graph to end up on an angle. I kind of expect that people making less will be renting. And then as you get older and you're making more income, you're going to shift towards buying. But we're just not seeing that reflected in Washington renters right now. Okay. So as we can see from the right, 1 in 3 people making between $75,000 and $100,000 a year are renting. 1 in 4 people making between $100,000 and $150,000 a year are renting, and 2 out of 10 people making $150,000 more are renting. Okay, so again, those are great salaries to be in a rental position. This is just perspective we all need to have so we can understand this issue and see how multifaceted it is. This issue is affecting people in our higher tax brackets, right? This is not just a low income issue, although we are seeing the impact of it more in our low income communities. So yeah, this is our little window according to, according to that data. This is our little window of our average earner in Washington. And we're looking at about 1/3 of them overall renting. So then we do have, subsidized affordable housing in Washington as well. And that's going to be super important as we address this crisis and try to get people into homes. So one thing that the University of Washington noticed when they looked at the data for affordable housing in Washington, and they were looking at income restricted units produced with subsidies, public or private subsidies. Okay. So statewide, we have 155,214 of these units in the entire state. It's a shockingly low number to me. And if you look at how they're kind of spread out, geographically, they're disproportionately represented in 10 counties. Okay. Now, clearly, we're going to see population centers in these 10 counties. And that makes sense. But if you look at the map, we have our pink houses on the disproportionate representation here. 42% of all of these units are in King County, which is good for King County. But I'm going to draw your attention to the bottom right of our beautiful state and Garfield down in the southeast corner there. Okay. So if you look at the numbers, King County is doing okay, right? We have significantly more demand for these houses than we have supply. In general, there are 4 households who need these low income renter units for every unit that we have. So it's slightly better in a county like King County, where you have so many of them. And we're going to talk about why in a second. They only have three households per available unit. It's not a lot better, but it's better. But in Garfield County, where I just pointed out, they have 93 households per available unit. So when we're taking care of Washington and we're thinking about getting Washingtonians in homes, we care about our communities, but we cannot ignore our rural neighbors or our rural counties or our smaller counties, because these, folks without homes, it's just going to be a continuing problem until we address it evenly, I guess, throughout the state, would be my point there. But don't worry, it's not just the us thing. No state in the entire country has an adequate supply of affordable rental housing for their low-income renters. I'm trying really hard to find positives here. No, it's not just us. This is a problem across the entire country. And I think it's important to point that out. Yes, absolutely, Washington has its glows and its grows, as I like to say, right? It's shining moments and its flaws, like every other state. But we're looking at this at a national level again, like that supply and demand issue. We didn't do, it's not you, it's not the individual. Individual choices did not leave us here, is guess what I'm trying to say. But if you want to be mad at somebody, you could maybe be mad at Airbnb. Just kidding. But it is a factor. We got to talk about vacation rentals and vacations and short-term rental homes. Airbnb and VRBO. They reduce the housing supply, period, end of sentence. But they're also a great way for people to bring in extra income and passive income. And if you've worked to afford a second house and make income from this, it's not a one-sided issue. Again, it's a multifaceted issue. However, the data shows that between 2010 and 2021, there was a negative 22,500 single unit detached rental homes. We lost 22,544 rental occupied units. And a majority of those became short-term rentals. You can't rent to a person all year if you're trying to move people through all the time, right? So across the country, actually across the world, we are seeing residents priced out of their own neighborhoods. I'm very closely following Barcelona because I'm very interested to see if they actually follow they're one of the cities that's really looking at cracking down on short-term rentals within residential buildings like apartment complexes. So be interesting to see what country moves first on it, but it's absolutely a factor. Okay, we know that all of this is impacting all of this housing instability has impacted homelessness in our state and people experiencing homelessness in our state. And we're going to try to be really intentional about that, about saying people experiencing homelessness and students experiencing homelessness. And I know Milady's going to talk a little bit later about how words are powerful and words matter. These students are going through this. They did not choose this experience. So we feel very strongly about that language, and we'll try verbally to keep up with it as well. Sometimes my, old habits, but. So we're gonna define homelessness as anyone who is lacking a fixed, regular, adequate nighttime residence. That's including anyone who's sleeping in an emergency shelter, a safe haven, a transitional housing program. And then unsheltered areas, which we're going to talk about in a minute.
And can I add to that? Sorry,
Absolutely.
Amy. Also people living doubled up. That's another really important.
So, yes. Thank you. So what I really just want you to see here, this is a national report. This is the annual homelessness assessment report to Congress, right? It's the under 18 numbers. It's the under 18 numbers that are so big that it is changing what it looks like to be homeless in America. The face of homelessness in America is changing, and it is young. It is families with children. I know from the answers that you guys know this because you put it in the chat earlier because you're seeing it. You know what I mean? But I just can't express how important I think it is that we shift our perception of who the, like, quote unquote, traditionally unhoused person is. Because we're going to need that. And we're going to need that empathy as a state to get us through this. So this information is from the U.S. Department of Urban Housing and Development in the Office of Community Planning and Development. And people in families with children have had the largest single year increase in homelessness. Between 2023 and 24, we had a 39% increase in families with children experiencing homelessness. 1 of every 4 people experiencing homelessness is a child under the age of 18 or a young adult between the ages of 18 and 24. Okay, the next ones are rough. I'm not going to lie to you. Unsheltered homeless are people whose primary nighttime location is a place not designated for sleeping accommodation, such as a car, a public place. It is a place no human being should have to lay their head down at night. We lead the nation in unsheltered homeless, unfortunately. At more than 50% of our unhomed are unsheltered. In addition, in 5 states, more than half of all veterans experiencing homelessness were sleeping in places not meant for human habitation, and unfortunately, Washington is one of those as well. We also have the highest rate of chronic homelessness. When you look at being chronically homeless, in comparison to the homeless population. So I may have an issue with a slide here. Chronically homeless is a person with a disability who has been homeless for more than 1 year, or up to 12 months, or a person with a disability who has experienced up to a year of homelessness across 3 years. Okay, so we, again, highest rate of chronic homelessness in the US, and in the report, we're actually mentioned, Washington is mentioned because of this. And when they kind of dug down into it, they got their data from continuums of care, so outreach centers, and that they really noted that it was housing costs. However, it's important to note, we increased the amount of outreach we were trying to get to encampments over the last couple of years, and especially that we're trying to reach our homeless students. So this is part of the reason why our numbers are popping up right now so recently and kind of dramatically, is because we're trying harder to figure out who they are. So that is also just a factor to consider. So a lot of this it's all connected. We're going to talk a little bit about civic participation and civic engagement. We've talked a little bit about policy and how that can impact things. But I want to just talk about King County for a second, because remember, they have 42% of those low income affordable rentals. So why is it that they have those? They have those because they changed their policy in 2015 when they declared homelessness epidemic emergency, right? They decided they were going to put their money on building permanent housing rather than emergency shelter. And you can kind of see both sides of this, at least I can. I think the intention was this long-term solution to get people homed, housed, to address this core issue, right? On the downside, it is much more expensive and takes much more time. And your opportunity cost for this choice is leaving people outside for the next couple years to shelter them in the future. Since this decision and policy was made, Seattle King County has increased their shelter capacity by 8%, while their homeless population has increased by 67%. So again, the issue is multifaceted. Okay, yes, now they have a bunch of rental units, which is good. But at the same time, we still have people outside right now. So your solutions are going to be really focused on your communities and where you live and what's being impacted there. So key takeaways, right? We've really gone over a lot of this data. It's heavy, it's big, but they did present a solution in that Washington State Department of Commerce advisory plan. They said, we need to build 1.1 million new homes in the next 24 years. Okay, and 47%, almost half, need to be affordable housing for low-income individuals. And since I have been researching for this presentation, I have been looking around at every construction site that I see in Spokane, and I see a lot of them, but I do not see a lot of low-income housing going up. So that is one thing we can be paying attention to as citizens in our counties and in our cities. Great, you're building. If you are not building low-income housing, you are not going to be addressing this issue for our community. And like you guys pointed out before, we are absolutely seeing an increase in our students experiencing homelessness, particularly our unaccompanied youth, our migrant youth, our Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islanders, Black or African American youth, and our American Native or Alaskan Native youth. All right, so there is hope though. And I'm going to shift now away from some things that can feel very doom and gloom. We can shake it off a little bit. Got to sit through the discomfort to get to the empowerment on the other side. I've kept saying that to myself the entire time I've been planning this, because we can't have hope if we don't have realistic expectations. So the knowledge that we're sharing here, we're hoping is giving you a more complete picture of what the problem is, so that you can explain it to your students or start the conversation with your students. We're not asking you to solve it. We know that it's a big puzzle, right? But we're going to present ways to look at realistic expectations and where we have agency. What skills can you be building in your students to give them some more confidence for the future? And I'm going to move through this part a little bit quicker, just because I want to make sure that Milady has all the time that she needs. Oops, and then I did that. Okay. We've been taught home ownership is the best investment, but as we've just kind of seen, wow, I really did not do her any favors with that screen grab. As we've just seen, it's a little bit, it's not, home rates are not, income is not going up at the same amount as homes, right? So we just want to be realistic and just be honest. The traditional path of adulthood is changing, right? It's no longer like graduate, go to college for 4 years, buy a house, get married, picket fence, 2.5 kids, golden retriever. Great, if that's what you want, and awesome, like go for it. But this expectation that that's the norm, we're ready to kick that out the window, because we are just much more diverse than that, not only in our state, but in our country. So we just want to be aware, when you say you want to own a home, why? Is it a family expectation? Is it a societal expectation? Do you think it's the only way to secure financial stability? Are you believing you are supposed to do better than the previous generation did? As a daughter of immigrants, Milady, I know you feel it, right? A lot of our students who are not born here or come here, we feel that heavily, this need to be successful and do better to make that sacrifice worth it. Or, even if you were born here and your parents just struggled and rose socioeconomically, right? You feel like you want to show that you can do better. We got to kind of let that go. I feel like as a society, it's hurting us at this point. When do you want to own a home? You don't need to own a home at 21. You should be traveling. You should have options. You know what? Yeah. Where do you want to own it? Do you want to live in your hometown for the rest of your life? Do you really want to put roots down there? If you had asked me at 17 if I was going to buy a house in Spokane, Washington, I would have called you crazy. I wanted to get out of there so bad. I couldn't appreciate what a beautiful place it was to grow up or live, or to have seasons or water you could drink out of the tap, until I was older and had experienced other things. So we just want them to be aware of this, Plus, oh my God, owning is such a pain sometimes. We never talk about this, do we? Right? So it's good. Go through these scenarios with your kids. Hey, dishwasher breaks, floods the kitchen. What's the difference between renting and owning in that situation? A phone call, if you're renting, right, to the office manager, I need to get this scheduled, come fix it for me, versus money out of your pocket when you're the homeowner. Right? So there's a lot of different reasons to look at home ownership. It's absolutely a positive. But if it's only an expectation, maybe we want to rethink this. Here's another kind of a tool you can use to kind of break down, what does it mean to rent or to own? What is this perception that we think we have of it? As again, like maybe financial stability or economic mobility or building generational wealth. It's all great, but is it realistic? Also, let's see here. Civic participation. Okay, our path to home ownership today is going to be different. It's not impossible. It's just going to be different, right? And I at first had called this civic engagement, but I feel like with civic engagement, we think that's just voting. And we're like, oh, I voted, I'm engaged. And maybe participation is kind of the same thing too, right? We participated, but really we're looking at addressing issues of public concern. And this is all going to require us to kind of engage with our communities. The cool thing is that we know that communities like home ownership improves communities. You feel pride in it. You feel pride in your street, not just your house, your yard. You want things to improve. You're invested in the neighborhood, right? We see these particularly in low income areas where home ownership increases. So there are a lot of ways for us to engage, communicating with leaders, attending community meetings, joining neighborhood organizations. Our voices are powerful. We pay taxes. They're not building enough low income, units in your city. Let them know. Okay, so 2 areas. I'm going to give you guys some tools here. We're talking about individual agency because we could talk. I could go through a million different areas of financial education to help with this, right? It's huge, but 2 places we have agency, and here's that shifting perspective I wanted to present to you. If you want to be a homeowner in the future, there's 3 things you need to ask yourself. Do you know what your lifestyle is going to cost you? Do you know what income your job and career choices will provide? And do you know if your educational choices are going to provide you the knowledge and training you need? Okay. My dad was like, you can be anything you want to be. And I could, but there was literally no point in going to a 4-year private university to get a communications degree. That cost benefit analysis, that math's not math, right? So we want our kids to be making different choices. So 2 resources we're going to be looking at here are the Jumpstart Reality Check. Okay, this is linked. It's going to be in your resources. It's like a quiz. It's a short quiz. Okay, and it's free. They answer a few questions. They click, okay, we'll start. And they're going to fill out stuff like transportation. I clicked used car because I have a used SUV. Smartphone and internet, all kinds of questions like this. They kind of go through maybe 15 minutes tops. And then it's going to tell you, all right, you're going to need about $35,800 if you want to live that way. That means this much a week and this much per hour, which means we are not applying for jobs that are less than this much per hour because they are not sustainable for us to live on. I get really passionate about this. When I was moving from Arizona, I had a number. I had X. I am not applying for jobs that pay less than X. Now, granted, I was farther along in my career and I had that luxury, but I wanted to own a home in Spokane. I wanted that. I'd wanted it for 5 years at that point, and I wasn't going to get there unless I made X. Right? So it's that confidence in ourselves to be able to just say, that's what I'm worth. That's my value. That's what I'm going for. I also love investigating careers, spending the time to make sure we know that this would be an investment in post-secondary, training or education. So this is a great website. Lets you search by keyword, industry, or interest. And it's going to give you your job outlook. And of course, we need to let our students know that they're not going to start at that middle point. That's why there's a range. Great math application for reading graphs. Okay, and this is for electrician. This is statewide. Bright outlook. That's good to know. All right, let's look at locally. So you can put in your state and your zip code. So I did. And in the Spokane Valley, it's not quite as profitable, not quite as good of a living as in general Washington. There's kind of other areas, but it's around better, beats the United States average. That's a good career to look into. That's sustainable in this state. That could get you into a home, right? And then they'll even break down all kinds of numbers for you if you want. Something that simple can be what prepares our students for home ownership. And I'm up against the end of my time here, so I'm going to just include as well credit scores and financial education. Okay, financial reputation. Putting some time into talking about credit scores with your students can be the thing that makes a big difference for them. So these resources that I am moving through, and I'm sorry I don't have more time, will be available again within that package guide that we talked about. It is 31 pages of everything you ever wanted to know about credit history. If you don't know as an adult, I learned things reading this resource. 100% I learned things. So I think you'll really enjoy it. It has things like, checklists for getting credit reports. It has a model email for disputing an error on a credit report. It's a really complete resource. And yeah, the reason why it matters is because it makes it more affordable. Okay, so that's just one other concrete skill. We have agency over it, right? We are in control of paying our credit on time and improving our scores. So, all right. And I'm gonna go ahead and stop. Oh, sorry. I apologize, Milady. Did I stop sharing? I did.
You did.
All right. So thank you for that. And I am gonna get back to this and turn it over to Milady as soon as I can get.
Well, while you do that, Amy, I just want to thank you for leading this webinar so successfully up to this point. I learned so much. We have learned so much while putting this together. And thank everyone for your participation in the chat. I really appreciate it. So we're going to move on here to how to have courageous conversations about housing and the experience of homelessness. Again, homelessness is not an identity. That's not what defines you. It's just an experience, and it's supposed to be transitory. It's supposed to be temporary, right? So all of you guys, I was reading the chat. So many of you are supporting At Promise Youth. This is new verbiage that I acquired through attending a conference that the Justice Impacted program in OSPI was putting together. And I heard them refer to At Promise Youth instead of At Risk Youth. And Amy talked about this. Words matter. When we say At Risk Youth, those youth we're referring to can hear us. And it feels a lot better when you hear someone refer to you as an At Promise Youth than an At Risk Youth. And we're hoping to build empathy for everyone, for our students, and remove the shame from asking for help, right? There's often so much shame, and as Amy shared, through no fault of our own. So many families and individuals are being impacted by this housing crisis. So that's a little bit about what we're going to be doing, and we're also going to be sharing a wonderful lesson. So Amy shared a lot of data. Get ready, because I'm going to share a little bit more, okay? But this is going to be quick. This is not going to be the bulk of this session. So a lot of the students are experiencing homelessness. Most of them are students of color. That's something that really they're overrepresented in this category of experiencing homelessness. One piece of information that I do want to add here, the data pertaining to the enrolled students in our Washington State K-12 education system experiencing homelessness is actually a bit higher. The number you see on screen is 42,436. And that data is from the 2022-2023 school year. I've actually been in communication with the assistant director for the McKinney-Vento program in OSPI, and the number sadly has increased significantly since last year. So for the 2023-2024 academic year, that number has gone up to 48,503 students, a very significant increase in just 1 year. Some of the students that are experiencing homelessness at higher rates are also experiencing, non-voluntary mobility. Of course, our unhomed youth are going to be the main group that we refer to in this category. But our migrant youth are also experiencing homelessness at much higher rates. I've shared in earlier webinars that we have the second highest population of migrant students in the country, second only to California. Many of them are living doubled up, right? Sharing space with other families just to save on costs, because our migrant communities, very hardworking, but very low earning in terms of what they get for the very hard work that they do. Another little known fact is that our students in foster care, while they're in between placements, right? So while they're moving from one guardianship to another, and they're in the care of the DCYF, they're considered homeless as well. So the rates of those students in foster care experiencing homelessness are much higher than other students. So for a lot of people, myself included, I've learned a lot since I took this position, right? I thought one of my biases was, well, if you're unhomed, it just means that you are living in the streets. That's not correct, right? As you see here, if a student is doubled up, they're also considered homelessness. And the impact, the emotional, the academic impact is just the same as being unsheltered and experiencing unsheltered homelessness. They have lower graduation rates, higher dropout rates. They're reported missing school or absent at higher rates, and over-disciplined when compared to all other students. And that has a very big impact. Many of these students are also working at earlier ages just to contribute to the family economy, right? Just to contribute to the family finances. And we can move on to the next animation here. So a lot of these students are younger and working. And this is just to say, it's so important to provide financial education in the classroom. Why? Because we're assuming that, well, parents are having financial conversations at home. They're not actually. Parents we have a statistic that shows they don't love having that financial conversation at home, mostly because nobody had it with them. It's not that they don't want to, it's that they don't know how to have that conversation, right? So particularly for parents that were born outside of the United States, these are parents that may not fully understand the financial system that we have in America and may be hesitant to join that financial system. So they're going to be parents that have higher rates of being unbanked and underbanked, right? With students that are working out of necessity and are accessing as a family high cost financial services. Predatory services like payday lending. They're accessing check cashing places because they don't have direct deposit. They don't have a relationship for a bank account. And think about it. When you are moving around at higher rates, it's hard to establish a relationship with a financial institution because you don't know if the next place you're going to will have, what's the term here, a brick and mortar location, or if you have in-network ATMs that you can access without a fee, that can also be costly, right? If you're paying bills using money orders, that also is a cost. So there are so many high cost alternatives to just functioning and paying your bills and trying to stay on top of things that you have if you're not having a bank account, or if you're accessing these alternative banking services. They also have higher rates of identity theft. And this is a very little known fact, I feel like. Our students, the more you move around, the more the chance increases that your personally identifiable information will be not so personal. Like if you're living with another family, if you're doubled up, unfortunately, our foster youth are experiencing identity theft at much higher rates. Sadly, it's often the foster parents that are, perpetuating the crime. And it's often by the time our youth find out that their identity has been stolen, it is often way too late. The damage has been done. They're finding out when they're applying for a car loan for the first time and they get denied. And it's because there's $40,000 of loans that have been taken out in their names. And there's very little you can do about that, right? So additionally, our students in these categories, as they transition into adulthood, they don't have the same supports that other students traditionally have because their families are also struggling. They're experiencing economic hardship. So they're facing these very serious life-changing financial decisions with very little knowledge, and they would benefit most. Statistics show, we have research that show that students in disadvantaged categories are the ones that benefit most from financial education because it prepares them so well for taking these adult decisions and this transition into adulthood. So from here, right, what we are hoping that we can leave you with is having more tools under your belt to have these courageous conversations with your students. Amy shared a lot of data pertaining to just why we got to where we are today, right? And using facts and not that fear-based mentality is so important, right? When you're having these conversations. I can admit there was a lot I didn't know. There was a lot I didn't understand when I first started learning about this topic. I am a perpetual learner, and I'm so happy that we get to do this and share this information with you because it definitely empowers me to have conversations and feel like I can have a better understanding of how we got to where we are today. We also want to recognize and hold space for, for those biases that we have and where they came from. No, thanks to media, TV, movies, they have perpetuated a lot of these, and we're going to dispel those and help you dispel those with your students through some fun activities and lessons. Always have a growth mindset, an asset-based mentality to personal finance and to this conversation as well. Again, homelessness is not an identity. It is a transitory situation, a temporary situation. It does not define anyone.
Okay, so as we move into the bias thing, I'm going to turn it back over to you, but just so everyone knows, I am going to end the poll, and then we're going to go through, Milady will go through in this next section, some of these, we'll say myths and facts.
Right, we're going to debunk some of them, right? So when we're having these discussions with our students, right, we want to make sure that we recognize not all biases are negative. I have one, and I'm sure, Amy, you're not going to like this one. But growing up, especially in America, when I became aware of all the different nations, is such a melting pot. One very positive bias I heard was Asian people are smart. So not right that's something I've heard. I'm sure all of you have heard it. Asian people are smart. It's just something in their genes. They're just smart. They're great at math, right? People from India are great at technology. Are all biases negative? No, but the ones that pertain to people experiencing housing insecurity, many of them are. And there's no getting away from that. That's just facts, right? Ask your students, have they volunteered in any organizations that help support and provide services to people experiencing housing insecurity? How are people portrayed in the media? I know that that has contributed to a lot of those myths that we're going to be addressing shortly. They're usually portrayed as being mean, as being a person of color. Usually they have like a brown paper bag that we assume is always alcohol or something like that, right? So they're not portrayed very well. How do we interact? Do we even interact with homeless people, right? It takes a lot of courage. And we're not trying to shame anyone, especially our students. We're not trying to make them feel bad if they're not interacting with homeless individuals, because it takes a lot of courage. And you have to kind of have the skills to recognize, is this safe or not? It may not always be safe. We may not always encounter a person that is, willing to say good morning back to us if we say good morning. It's okay for our students to know that this is a learning experience. And as they get older, they will have the skills necessary to determine that for themselves and maybe not always get it right. Because I know as an adult, I've been very empathetic and greeted and not always received a greeting, but I'm not deterred from continuing to greet and acknowledge the presence of that individual, that human being that is right in front of me. So this is an activity that I hope you can take back to your students, right? And it's just another way to get the discussion started around housing insecurity and debunking a lot of these myths around individuals that experience homelessness. One of them is homeless people just need to get a job. In reality, a lot of people who are experiencing homelessness are working sometimes two jobs. As Amy shared with us earlier, this isn't an issue of income, it's an issue of housing and not having enough affordable housing, right? So that's one way to debunk that right there. Another one, most people experiencing homelessness have a mental health disorder. Okay, some of them do. We have 25 to 30% of individuals that are experiencing homeless have a mental health disorder, but a lot of people who are homed have mental health disorders is very similar rate. They're not experiencing homelessness. So this is often a symptom of experiencing homelessness, not a cause, right? People who are unhoused are dangerous and violent. That's a big myth as well. So the data shows that people who are experiencing homelessness are far more likely to be victims of crimes than to perpetrate the crime. And if you think about it, they're vulnerable. They're living with their, personal belongings outside or in shelters where many people have access to them. They are a victim of violent crimes. Often, there are higher rates of unreported sexual assaults for individuals who are experiencing homelessness, and these don't get reported, sadly, because individuals aren't, as willing to report the crime as a homeless person. They feel shamed and they feel like they're not going to get the same attention as someone who is housed. Another one, the majority of the unhoused population abuse drugs and alcohol. I don't know about you, but I know most people who are homed, not most people who are homed, but a lot of people who are homed they use drugs, they use alcohol, they're not homeless. So again, this is a symptom often of experiencing homelessness, not a cause. Because there would be a lot, the numbers of unhoused individuals would be a lot higher if that was the cause for homelessness, sadly. Last one, people's bad choices led to their homelessness. Oh my God, if this were true, we would all be homeless. I know I've made bad choices. I mean, imagine if every bad choice we made led to homelessness. That's simply not true. It is not that simple. And Amy did a wonderful job at showing us where this started and how we got here. It is not a bad choice. It is simply not having enough affordable housing, right? That's one of the reasons. Accidents happen. There can be a series of unfortunate events that happen to individuals. They lose their job, they become injured. There's a death in the family. There's some medical emergency, and all of a sudden, your emergency savings are gone and you cannot meet your obligatory expenses. Additionally, another statistic shows that if there is an increase of $100 in rent, homeless rates goes up by 9%, not 1 or 2, 9%. So again, it's not anyone's bad choice. Rarely is it one bad choice that leads to homelessness. So that brings us to a wonderful unit that I want to share with you. It comes from a program called Take Charge Today. This is a free resource, and they are with the University of Arizona. Email registration is required to access this resource, and it is ideally for 10 to 12 graders. The lessons are and activities usually take an hour to 2 hours to complete. Go
You
ahead.
guys, if you're a teacher, you know that those are very rarely accurate. You're gonna want more time. Just throwing that
Very
out.
true. Thank you for that. And this unit has an anticipatory set, excuse me, and we're going to dive into that in a little bit. I'm going to show you some very great activities. This is packed with cross-alignment opportunities. So this goes into social emotional learning, so much self-awareness and social awareness. It goes into social studies. It goes into economics, understanding civics for days, understanding what programs the government provides. Is it federal? Is it local? Is it state? So it's really packed, and you can really extend it as much as you want with your students. One of the main things that this unit does really, really beautifully is communicate with great empathy that sometimes people need a lifeline. And again, these are going back to what I mentioned earlier. We could have an economic recession. We could be laid off to no fault of our own. The pandemic was a great example of that, right? We had people who had 3 to 6 months of savings, like, economists recommend for emergency circumstances. And they blew through those 3 to 6 months of savings, and there was still no relief, right? So many people lost their jobs. People who had very profitable jobs and high incomes for the first time ever were relying on government programs, right? And thank God for them, because otherwise the homeless population would be significantly higher. And what we want our students to know is that this is assistance that is there if you need it. There's no shame, right, in needing help. If you need that lifeline, please use it, because that's what it's meant to do. It's meant to be temporary assistance to face difficult life circumstances that just happen, not because you're a bad person or made a bad decision. They just do.
And I just want to jump in because I'm so excited about her including this program or this lesson. Regardless of how you feel about these government programs, where's the harm in teaching our students to use them responsibly? That would just be the question I would pose if there's any sort of like hesitancy towards, oh, is this a topic that I would really want to get into, right? The only approach here is responsible use. And I think that that's just
Absolutely.
really, really cool.
No, thank you for pointing that out. That's absolutely what we want, and they do a beautiful job at it. So, pre-lesson discussion questions. What biases exist for people on government assistance? We know they're out there, right? One of the ones that I've heard a lot, it actually correlates with the same myths for homelessness. They just need to get a job. They're just lazy. And that's also not the case here. A lot of people who are having to rely on temporary assistance from the government are working. They're just not making enough because rent is so high, because it's so expensive to live somewhere, right? What is your perception of of people on government assistance? And that goes back to that self-awareness, right? What have I heard? Am I going to paint everyone with the same stroke just because I know of one person? Because we all know of that one person that abused the system. We all know of that one person who has been on it too long and just doesn't want to get a job. That's not everyone, though. Let's recognize, yes, that happens, but that's not everyone, right? How can we prepare for those unfortunate events that happen? That's one of the objectives that this lesson hits, right? We want our students to be able to identify the programs that are available, right? If in case that they need that support. They will also be able to analyze how the programs were designed to provide income safety nets. And again, temporary solutions, temporary help. They're not meant to be, your safety net forever. We're going to talk about how this program shows you that you actually will be better off working and making that livable wage eventually than you are staying on the benefits. So one of the fun activities that this unit has is the what if life event happens card. And I would love it if you guys answer this question in the chat. So through no fault of your own, you were laid off from your job, right? I love how they don't include gender or race or any, identifiable information that would have that stereotype automatically. So which government program can support an individual in this scenario? Please enter your answer in the chat.
And while you're answering, this is my cue to give you or to pop in with my story. So I have been laid off and I have also been fired. And those are two completely different things. And they're really important that our students understand the difference between the two. I was young and I was fired for a job for my attitude and my work ethic. My actions at that job led to me losing that job. When I was laid off, it was 2008 and everybody I knew had lost their job, right? It was, again, my first recession. So, there's a big difference between the two. And we want to make sure our students are aware of the agency, again, between those two. There's only really one scenario where we want you to find this support.
Absolutely.
And how'd they do, my lady?
They did great. So if you answered all three, you are correct, right? And again, we want our students to know what is what, when they would be If they find themselves in a similar situation through no fault of their own, they're not making enough to meet their obligatory expenses, some of these programs can be utilized as a safety net. Let's do one more. So this one is a little trickier. Now you're a parent, so you're depending, there's a person that's depending on you to bring home the bacon, and you were also laid off. You have not been able to find your job, and you went through all of your emergency funds. I love that, because there's another assumption about people who rely on government assistance. Oh, they don't know how to make good financial decisions. This person did. They had their emergency savings. That's part of, positive financial decision making. It's part of financial education. That's part of what we teach. So in this case, which government program could support an individual in this scenario? I have to admit to you guys, I did not exactly understand TANF fully before I did this. Y'all are smart. You caught on pretty quick. All is correct. Kudos to you. Well done, guys. That's fantastic. So now I want to walk you through Calvin's story, right? So as part of this unit, we see 3 different stories, and we chose Calvin's story because it's a little bit not what you would expect, right? So Calvin is a father of 2 little girls. He's widowed and he's estranged from his parents. He's using government assistance program, but his goal is to be financially independent. So to eventually not need that government support, right? So through this path, we see Calvin's story, how he got to where he is, why he needs this assistance, because now he is one income and having 3 people that are relying on him for support. And his income is simply not sufficient. So he starts relying on this government assistance. And we can then ask our students, right? Go ahead, Amy. No, you're good. You're fantastic. What is one of the things that they see is Calvin's income before he gets his job, and he was relying heavily on government assistance. But as we see his evolution, Calvin's evolution, he gets a job, and then he starts receiving less assistance, right? And the most beautiful question comes at the end. Is Calvin better off financially with or without a job, and by how much? And you can see Calvin's expenses prior to work and after work. And that's the beauty of this unit. There's that pride. And he says that in his story. Calvin says, I feel so much pride that I'm able to provide for my daughters on my own. And he achieves that financial independence. And again, the point is we want to communicate with our students that there's nothing wrong with needing this support and accessing this support in times of need. But the goal is to be financially independent and not need that assistance. So as Calvin, another activity rather for Calvin's story, we go through what other sources of support he could access. So they know about the government programs, but what about the parents, right? What about friends? Usually that's the first line of defense. When you see yourself in a situation of financial crisis, you say, okay, who can help me temporarily? Again, is the same situation as with government assistance. Where can I turn to for temporary assistance? Can my friends help me? And that goes to that self-awareness and that social awareness. Are they in a situation where they can help? Have I been a good friend in the past? Sometimes it's good to be a good friend and pay back on time. Can I, are my parents or my grandparents a good source of support? Can they also provide that opportunity for temporary assistance? So we really do look at this issue holistically through this unit.
Oh my gosh, we made it through. Before we go to our closing, I am going to show everyone, as promised, how to access that fantastic resource that Milady had mentioned. So we will give you the link to Take Charge Today. That will be provided to you within the resources. With it, can you see my screen okay, Milady?
Yes, we can see it.
I will say that this does require an email password or email registration. Okay. It's run through the University of Arizona. They're not going to sell your data and they will not be sending you anything. Now, one thing I would definitely recommend with Take Charge Today, because they have so many resources. Okay. And it can be a little bit challenging if you're new to the website to try to navigate it. I am looking for receiving. This is the receiving unit. Okay, and there it is right there, receiving from government programs. So again, once you have the login, you can download the materials. And we only touched on a few of the materials, as you can, oh, there we go, as you can see.
Yeah.
There is an additional whole presentation that they provide for you, as well as, I'm going to open up these workbook pages in just a moment, as well as a test bank and answer key. So this is, it can be what you want it to be. You know, if you want to follow it and go through the whole thing, great. If you want to skim through it and pick what you think is the most impactful for your kids, we loved Calvin's story and we love the anticipatory set. In addition, there is also receiving from family, friends, and nonprofit is an additional one. So if you are within a community where you're seeing that would be a very helpful lesson to go through, that's also an opportunity. So everything will just download. And of course, it opened up as over here. So hopefully you can still see this, but you're just going to get PDF.
It's
And
robust for sure.
there's a lot of them, right? So when we look at Calvin's story, for example, we were summarizing. Come on, open up here for me. This is Calvin's story. So when we say, you know, they're going to get a chance to look at it, it is a genuine story. We're looking at our literacy here, right? We're reading. In addition, when you're looking through Calvin's, if you want to do the whole, oh my goodness, open up for me here for Calvin. Okay, so that was our reading. Now we're going to look at our math applications here. So we're looking at reading tables, understanding, transferring information. Any of your students, oh my gosh, I taught middle school math, transferring information from one place to another accurately. We all need to practice this skill. It's little, but oh my gosh, just think about when you do your taxes, how important it is to transfer numbers from one place to another accurately. I really appreciate lessons that have us focus on this. So you see, they're going to break it all down for you. And you are going to get a chance to really look at what his costs are and see what Calvin is spending on a day-to-day basis, which some of these students have never been exposed to. You know, maybe that's just not a conversation they're having around the dinner table. But we have got, I mean, government, social studies, civics, math, reading, every social emotional learning, everything. You can hit standards in all of those in this one lesson. Yes, there are absolutely resources for middle schoolers. They do have a really great, I think they call it their intermediate course on Take Charge Today.
Yeah.
But, you know, in my experience with middle schoolers, I found they can handle a lot. And,
Yes.
and maybe like the math, even the math, I mean, if we're just looking at decimals to the hundredths place value, I really feel like, you know, middle schoolers could handle this.
Absolutely.
Maybe they won't
It's
get
not
it perfect,
complicated.
but they
Yeah,
could
it's not
understand it.
complicated.
Yeah. So thank you so much, everybody. Are you seeing the Stay Connected
Yes,
with
we
Step
can.
slide?
Yeah.
Fantastic. It is 5:30. We're going to wrap it up. We have 2 more in this session. Again, next week, we're going to dive into social, emotional, and financial skills for shared housing. We're going to talk about social contracts and roommate agreements and how we can be successful with multi-generational living. And thank you so much for being here and staying through the heavy topic and the unpleasant data. And I hope we did give you some hope and some courage for bringing this up with your students.
Thank you for your
Lady?
participation. Thank you so much.
Yes. And thank you so much for being here. It just briefly, in case anyone came late, if you didn't show up right away or right at the beginning, go ahead and sign in with your name and school or district in the chat to make sure we get you your clock hours, which you will receive an email survey for those. There's no link or anything for attendance, just the chat. And we'll make sure that you have access to all of these resources as well. And if anybody has any questions, we will be around.
Absolutely.
And if you missed any sessions, we post all of our sessions on our YouTube page, free to view. Unfortunately, we're not set up to offer clock hours for those post viewings right now, but we do have them available just for knowledge. Awesome. And again, thank you guys. We're proud of this information, and we really appreciate the participation and the outreach, the attendance, and hope you found something useful. So have a great rest of your evening, and thank you again.